Hey, welcome back to edtech by Meera, and today we are going to learn how to make a basic calculator in Python 3. This is a Python tutorial for beginners, and as usual this is going to be yet another simple but interesting tutorial where you'll be building a project that is a basic calculator. So in order to make a calculator you need to define certain things. You already learned what is defined in one of my previous tutorials, and this is basically where you need different functions like capabilities. So for example, here you need a capability of adding. One of the capability of calculator is adding, right? Another one is subtracting, then multiplication, division. So for these capabilities or functions, you need to define the activities or the attributes. So for add function, you need to define what is add, right? So define the add function where you have two numbers, number 1 comma number 2, right? Because you cannot add without two numbers, minimum two numbers, right? So where in this function add function, you'll be returning what? You'll be returning the result of the addition, which is number 1 plus number 2. Similarly, for the subtract function, you have to define it, number 1, number 2, where you'll be returning number 1 minus number 2, or you can say number 2 minus number 1, whichever. Then you have to define the multiplication function or the multiply function, where what you'll be returning, number 1 multiplied by number 2, and the multiplication symbol in Python is shown by doing the asterisk sign, as shown here. Multiply num1, num2, I call it num1, num2, and return num1 multiplied by num2. You can call it num, you can call it number, whatever you like. So here, just for the sake of simplicity, I prefer to call it num1 and num2. Yeah, so we have defined what is the add function, we have defined what is a subtract function, we have defined what's the multiply function, and then we'll be also defining what is the divide function, and that's simple. So define divide as actually you can copy paste from the add until you reach the divide, but I would prefer not to do that, and I would ask you also not to do that, because when you do repeated functions or repeated code like this, it literally sits in your mind and brain, and it's a good practice to memorize. Instead of sitting and memorizing, if you repeatedly do the same code, similar code or the same code, it's a good practice to memorize automatically. So I would prefer you to literally sit and repeat it all the way. In fact, what I do is first I write it by hand on paper, and then after that I type it, I enter it, or rather type it, and when I type it's the same thing. I literally do it one by one. So that's really a good practice. So define divide num1, num2. Yeah. So when you do, whenever you do the function and the loop, so this is the loop, you have to write that colon, do not forget that. So you have the multiply, divide, add, subtract. So for all these functions you have done that, and then after that you have to, what else you need to do? Remember, you have to do the while loop. So after defining all the functions, the above functions of add, subtract, multiply and divide, you've done that. So because if you don't define it initially, you will receive error messages later. So that's why. And this is a way to define. I'll try and see if I can give previous tutorial links so you can refer to that also for the define examples. Yeah. So so let's see what else is to be done. Now remember, this is a basic calculator where we are only creating or building this calculator in order to do the function of adding, multiplying, dividing, basic functions of adding, subtracting, multiplying and dividing. These are the basic task activities or functions that's happening here. We are not going to show you the calculator visually. That is a bit more complex using Tinker library, and I'll be doing it some other time. Yeah. so that you get to know a feel of both. So this one, you have to do the while true loop. Remember, for all these projects, it's a good idea to do the while true. And what it means is, as far as true is true, so that's a while loop. So that means it's true, meaning yes, it's true, it's actually happening. That means operations are happening. So in that loop, because if it's not happening, we don't need the while loop. So we are considering a situation where the operations are happening, the tasks are happening, where we are using all the add button, subtract button and all that. So then in that scenario, it's while true. Then we create some options, right? Because we are doing this for the user to use. So we want to know whether the user wants to have the option of adding, subtracting, multiplying or dividing or what else. We need to know that. So we have to give the option to the user. Or you can call it option, you can say choice, you can say the operation button or whatever. I prefer to keep it option because it's actually an option or a selection that we are giving to the user to decide whether he or she wants to add or subtract or whatever task he or she wants to do. So it has to be something like a selection or an option or a choice. So that's a user generated, so we need input function for that. Input, enter your option. The \n is for the new line. You know that already. And why am I doing in int before in? Because 1, 2, 3, 4 are integers, so that's why. So I write 1 and then the option of adding, next new line, 2, subtract new line, 3, and if you notice 1, 2, 3, 4, all of them are in a string format. Yeah, because these are all strings. First the numeral number, the digit, followed by the task, the description of the task. So you finish the input function here, so that will that will create the variable option to store these options, whether it's option 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if you select option 5, the user will exit, means he doesn't want to use the calculator anymore. That's option 5. So it's for exiting. So, and then after that, inside the while true loop, remember, this is inside the while true loop. First we created the options and then we gave it values in order to store the values inside option variable. Then after that, now we want to consider scenarios in which the user is going to consider what option and in what option what happens. That is, if the user selects an option 1, so you have to write if option equal 1, then what happens? Then how do you define, or what is the value of num1? What is num1? That is the first number. So if the user is using a value of 1, selecting the value 1, then number 1 will be float input, enter the first number. Because num1, when you see the tuple of num1, num2, then the num1 stands for the first number, num2 is the second number. Now why do it? So again you have to use the input function because you want the user to enter the number. Now why do you use float? Because in case it is a decimal number, that can be considered. So float input, enter first number, and num2 will be obviously float input, enter the second number. Because this is again user generated. That's why you need to use the input function. Now, after the user enters num1, the first number and the second number, the computer has to do something. That is, the computer, this is, remember, a calculator. So the computer works as a calculator and needs to find the sum of the first number and the second number. So I'm just saying it in a layman's language, not in a coding language, so that you understand what is the problem and the solution that we are finding. So this is how we build. This is how we consider and think in our mind while solving this project. So the user input the first number, then the user is prompted. Every time you use the input function, the user is prompted to enter the first number, then the second number, then the computer or the calculator, which works as a calculator, will print out the sum of the two numbers. So how do you express that? In order for it to print, you need to do code for this. So how? first the num1, because num1 is a variable, then comma, plus has to be a string, comma, num2 again a variable doesn't represent a string, comma, and then equal to sign, again a string, comma. Now after that the add function, remember we had defined the add function earlier, so comma, add function num1 num2. So this will print out. So what it will do is, you will see when I test it out, it will actually give you the result of the addition. So like this you keep on doing for the different choices or the options. So first option finished already, whereby the calculator will calculate the addition for you. Then you consider the second option. If option equal to 2, then again the same thing, num1 will be the same, user generated. The calculator will prompt you to enter the first number, because it will keep on doing that for every operation. So option equals to num1 is float, input, enter the first number, and similarly num2 will be float, input, enter the second number. This one will remain the same, but as usual I'm not copy pasting, I will keep typing it every time, because then this is a very good exercise for the memory. It will never, this is how even as a beginner I learned, like this, when the moment you say user generated input function, it stays in the mind, it will never go. So again num2 float, input, enter the second number. Then what you need to do, the computer or the calculator needs to print out after doing the task. And what is the task? Remember option 2, subtract. So print, again as usual num1, which is a variable, we've already created that, so it won't be stringed. So these are the parameters, print, in the print statement. So first num1, comma, then for subtract it's a minus sign, right? That will be stringed. So the stringed minus sign, comma, then num2, because num1 minus num2, you need to show like that, comma again, then the string equal to sign, comma, then the subtract function which we already defined above. We have already defined the add function, subtract function, multiply function, divide function. So here, comma, the subtract function, subtract num1 num2. Again, we created that as a subtract function, so you don't need to make it as a stringed one. So subtract num1 num2. So this is your print statement over. So what it will do is, it will actually print out, it will carry out the task of subtracting num2 from num1, that is num1 minus num2, and it will give the output of the result. Output or the result of the subtraction. Then keep on carrying on the same thing if option equals 3. Now why we are saying double equal? Because it's not just a value. Here we are, it's exactly the value. That means if the user clicks on the option of 3, so it has to be a double equal to sign. Because exactly it means 3. The value of the option here is going to be the number 3 or the digit 3. Sorry. So again the same thing, num1 user generated, it will prompt the user to input, enter the first number. So float, input, enter the first number. Again num2, float, input, enter the second number. Same thing. So keep on doing that until option 5. Float, input. So instead of saying float, if you put integer, it will convert the decimal number into an integer. You can do that also, that's up to you, but here prefer to do this way. Sorry. Okay, then print out. So now the calculator has to do its task of printing out the operation and the output. Okay, so I'm just double checking if it's multiplication. So num1, comma, and then the multiplication, the asterisk sign, comma. Then after that the num2. And then, okay, now some people prefer to write the cross, but I prefer the exact syntax for multiplication in Python is asterisk sign for multiplication. Yeah. So num2, comma, that's a variable which we already defined above, and equal to sign as a string, comma, multiply, the multiply function, multiply num1, num2. Multiply and then within the parenthesis num1, num2, because we are just multiplying only two numbers, the first number and the second number. So that's done. So it will print out the result of the operation of multiplication or multiplicating the two numbers, multiplying, sorry, the two numbers. And what other choice is left? Number 4. So if option equal to 4, remember, first addition, subtraction, multiplication, followed by division. So choice 4 we have written, and now you can write any option that you like. You can have division as your first choice, that's up to you. But usually it's an etiquette to write the addition and the subtraction first, followed by a multiplication, division. That's something like that. But you can also say division followed by multiplication. That's up to you. So if option equal to 4, again num1, the first number is user generated, so float input, enter the first number, and num2, float input, enter the second number. So here the difference is only in terms of the operator when you're printing out the output. Yeah, rest all remains the same. Every time the user is asked or prompted to enter the first number and the second number. Yeah, and okay, so that's finished, and now print out. So print first, of course, the num1, comma, then for division, whatever is the symbol for division, that is the /, comma, / as a string. This is called the /. Okay, /, comma, then num2, comma, because num1 divided by num2 equal to sign as a string, comma, and then the divide function, which we already defined out before defining the while loop, before doing the while loop, above, first thing first. So divide num1, num2. Then after that, so this will divide both the numbers and give you the result. So now what is left? So now the last option, which is if option equals to digit 5, then what do? Remember, this is for quitting or exiting. Yeah, so then you have to print out anything you can print out which shows that you're exiting. You can say like, okay, thanks for using my calculator, or no, I don't, do you still want to use, or if you don't you want to use, anything, that's up to you, which shows or indicates that the game is about to end and exit. So thanks for playing with my calculator, using my calculator, whatever statement you want to use, this is a exit statement, and then break. Remember, for exit from the game loop, you have to write break, which we've done it initially, we've done much earlier. Now else. Now what happens is if it's none of these 4 options, none of these 5 options, sorry, if option 5 is break, none of these 5 options, then what happens? Then it's print invalid. Like for example, instead of selecting option of 5, you say 6 by mistake, or 7. Or $, something like that. I mean, not $, anything, any number, any digit number which is other than 1 to 5. Then it will show an invalid input as the print statement. That means you're only supposed to remember the options are only supposed to be any number between 1 to 5. Other than this, if you input any other number in the option like 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, then it will show you as an invalid choice or an invalid option. So remember that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nothing other than that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anything like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 0, 11, it will show as invalid option. So let's test it out. Let's run it. Okay. Oh, there was an okay. I forgot to write a comma. after a variable. So that's why it's showing like this. Remember, I just forgot. Okay, so let's check it out. Okay, yes. After num1, I forgot to enter a 0. So now it's okay. 0 is very important. Okay, comma is very important. After num1, you have to write. After the variable, you have to write a comma before you write the string in the print statement. Enter first number 5 to, wow. It's already done the addition. The result is 7. 7.0 like a decimal. Remember, float. If it was not a float int, then it will just show as 7 instead of 7.0. That's the only difference. Okay, so we carried out the add function. Let's carry out all the different functions and test it out and run it again. So I stop and I run again. So second time I want to do the option of 2. So I click on 2. Enter the first number, 10. Enter the second number, 20. There you go. Invalid input. Oh no. Minus 10, because 10 minus 20 is minus 10. Wow, it's even taking care of that. Num1 minus num2. If num2 is a bigger negative number, the output is negative. That's good, right? That's cool. And again, the third option, multiply, also carried out. Wow, fantastic. Such a big number it was able to do. Then for divide, first number, big number, 200, second number, 5. There you go, 40. 200 divided by 5, 40.0. So that's quite cool. So I was able to do all the tasks of adding, subtracting, multiplying, and divide. All the functions were carried out. So 5, exit. Thanks for playing with my calculator. Now you cannot participate in the game anymore. You have to start all over again. In this loop you cannot. You exited the loop. Now I want to check for the invalid option. There you go. Invalid input. I tried another number like 9 and it shows invalid. If I write some other letter, it will show an error. So something like that. Because it's an input integer. So if I show a character like y or x, it will show another error. Okay. So there, I tried clicking 6, again showing invalid input, because it's only the choices between 1 to 5, not 6. So you are able to carry out the calculator, you are able to build the calculator, and you are able to use the calculator by doing the different functions of adding, subtracting, multiplying, etc. divide. Now just another quick thing. We were using if all along. Remember, in Python you can use the if-elif loop. So I just wanted to try that out. So everywhere, the first one I did the if loop. After that, the rest of all of them, the elif loop, until the end where I use the elif. So okay. So you see, until the option 5, I keep using elif. The first choice if, then 2, 3, 4, 5 as elif, and the last one obviously else. Remember, it was the if, elif, else loop. So I just tried to do that and again run. Okay, so let me try doing some task here using the calculator. Okay, 1. So that is for adding 100, second number 300. Wow. So it's able to add 390 something. Okay, so it's going to be useful for that. So no problem in using if, elif, else. That would be a better idea, yeah? There you go. I'm using complicated number to check it out for all the tasks. So there you go, a big number, 4, 2, 0, 0, 9, 0, 3, 4, 6, 6, 7, 5. My God, to the ultimate 8th or 10th position, it was able to do it. Oh, that's quite a very capable calculator. So I exited already. So for more such beginner Python tutorials, in order to become a Pythonista, Python expert, click that subscribe button and the bell notification so that you are there with me in your Python journey, safe and sound as a beginner. Without getting exhausted, I will teach you how to learn Python as a beginner. See you in the next tutorial with more interesting Python projects.